Welcome to the Resume Storyteller, bringing you interviews with industry experts, regular folks who tested the job search waters and succeeded, and strategies to tell your story and land you job interviews. Here's your host, Virginia Franco.
Hey guys, I have with me today professional speaker and Amazon recruiter Dan Roth. With an emphasis on narrowing the gender and racial wealth gap, women's empowerment, and neurodiversity awareness, Dan's a disruptor looking to make the world a better place for traditionally marginalized communities. His weekly Job Connection Tuesdays has put job seekers that span levels, roles, and industries in front of over 3 million eyes. And as a recruiter, his focus has been on sourcing candidates in tech, cybersecurity, and healthcare. Dan joined Amazon in 2021 as a technical recruiter and has been recognized as one of the top 25 job search experts to follow on LinkedIn by JobScan, and currently ranks at the top of Mellor Marketing Rockstar list for non-LinkedIn coaches. So Dan, thank you so much. For everyone listening, this is take 2. I accidentally deleted our entire recording, and Dan just graciously agreed to do this again, which is a testament to the kind of a person he is. So thank you.
It's my pleasure. Like I told you before, this is a second opportunity to spend an hour talking to a friend. And the great thing about me is that everything progresses so fast that there's things that I could talk about now that didn't happen the last time we spoke.
Right.
So it makes it work out. I not that I feel the need to correct, but just so you know, that 3.6 number was for 2021. We are nearing 5 million people in the last year and a half.
We're only 4 months into the year. That's incredible.
Yeah. Well, here's the difference. Last year in January, I was just starting off. So we get those ones where we had 5, 10, 15,000 views. Every week so far this year has, I think the bottom has been 60, 65,000, and we're averaging about 85, 90 with a peak of about 140, 150. So because of that, the curve is a lot stronger just based on numbers, and using 80,000 as a low estimate. That means I'm putting job seekers in front of 320,000 people a month.
For those of you who don't know, can you explain what prompted you to start Job Connection Tuesdays, and explain exactly what it is for those who don't know?
Sure. So I came on LinkedIn, like so many others, looking to really stand out to recruiters. And I noticed that there were a lot of posts that were going on that were based off of networking. Carolyn Christie, who's also a recruiter, was basically the gold standard for that. And I saw what she was doing, but I realized nobody was doing something similar for people that were looking for jobs. So I figured, okay, let me try to fill that gap. And I didn't really think about it. Like I didn't have my network build up. I just thought, worst case scenario, I help some other people find jobs. Best case scenario, I'm able to stand out and find a job for myself. And to my surprise,
you were a job seeker back then. That's what's so amazing to me.
Yep. I was over a year into my unemployment, which effectively made me a stay-at-home father of twins, because we both have kids, and you know that the cost of childcare is so high. Mm-hmm. I couldn't accept a base level role because it would have put me in more debt financially.
Right.
So I started it there, and the goal was real simple. I made some clear directions, said job seekers, post what you're looking for, recruiters, post what you're after. And I really placed a focus on helping the military community and a couple of others. And to my surprise, it took off. By the third week, we had something like 20-something thousand views. I'm like, okay, well, I've stumbled onto something. And I kept on going. And what this really did was this, without knowing it, I was creating the groundwork for what has now become my career and my true passion in life. So now there's other components of this. if you stay at a standstill, then it's going to get old because people are going to be looking at the same individuals coming back week after week. So as I started exploring how to be more beneficial and more helpful to other people, because at this point it was a global platform. I mean, I've helped job seekers in 30 different countries.
Yeah.
And so what would happen is when I noticed a gap, I would go ahead and really navigate and do searches to find recruiters in those gaps or in those countries. For a long time, Canada was a huge weak point for me because I couldn't find recruiters there. So I did that. Just to give you a recent example, this past week, there was a recruiter that posted, and it was a recruiter that basically hires teachers, but not in the traditional sense. She works for a company that hires teachers for independent schools. And for those that are listening, independent schools basically means private, charter, yeah, so on and so forth. So a lot of the prohibitive factors that are causing people to leave the profession don't necessarily exist in these schools.
Is that Julie Landis who you're talking about? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So I looked at it two ways. I'm thinking, okay, well, a lot of these people leaving teaching are not wanting to leave teaching. They're feeling forced. So this presents at least a secondary opportunity for them to see if they could find something for them. And then the second thing is, okay, even if they do, at least now that they've explored these options. So that's just kind of an example. And through that came the group, and here we are today.
It is a global platform that connects recruiters with open positions with job seekers, and it's industry diverse, correct?
Yeah, I mean, that's the kind of cool thing. People would ask me, well, what do you recruit for? I'm like, well, I have a background in project management, healthcare, software development. But when I started this, I didn't know I was going to become a recruiter. So I really didn't have that specific focus.
What a perfect example of discovering a passion and turning it into a career. But it came out of something completely unexpected.
It truly did. And the thing is, I always knew I loved helping people. I mean, I've been working with women's empowerment for years upon years. I've been working in diversity inclusion for a long time as well. I've always been what people would call a quote unquote giver. So, but the reality was that I didn't feel like at 35, 36 years old that I could afford to make another pivot because I had already made 3 in my career to that point. So I was very reticent to fully commit. And at a certain point in life, you just got to get out of your own way. And even though other people had told me, I had to come to that conclusion myself. And that was something that was truly key.
So when did you decide, okay, I'm going to become a recruiter now?
So I remember very distinctly, based on the work that I had done, I had an old boss that had started with a new company that had reached out to me to help her find some candidates, but also there was a position. And I applied for the position. I went down to the final interview. I talked with 3 people and I was rejected for it. And what I found out later was that it was the head boss that had made the ultimate decision, and other people wanted to hire me. Well, anyway, that day I went on LinkedIn. I did a live, a very raw, very real, and I wound up meeting Anna Morgan, who became my coach. And Anna says, okay, well, you really should go into recruiting, and you'd be great at it because she's a recruiter. And we start talking. And then one day, a couple months later, in a clubhouse room with Pat Roquet, and she said something about having an open position. I'm like, well, I like you. I need a job. Why not me? And she said to me, what do you want to do? And while that seems like a very elementary question, it struck me at the right moment in time. And I really spent the next 2 or 3 hours contemplating. And then I don't know what happened, but I very much had that aha moment. Mm-hmm. And I ran and I called Anna. And by the way, just to give people a visual, the closest that I could count to how I ran it, it's like when you're a kid and you get a new toy and you're like running to it. I called Anna. I said, Anna, I made a decision. I'm going to be a recruiter. And she's like, no, Dan. And so from there, that was really the pivot point, and I was off to the races. And once I had that clarity, everything came together. In the first week when I decided, I took 40 to 50 hours worth of LinkedIn learning courses to get up to date on current recruitment principles and styles and how everything is run. I did a course with Catherine McCord, who's a friend of mine that runs her own firm. I did informational interviews with 5 or 6 people from major organizations. And I really set a plan in place for, okay, if I'm going to do this, I can't come at it from an entry-level standpoint. So how do I then navigate to present myself the best opportunity? And ultimately, what happened was I was getting interviews, but everybody was looking at my experience and it didn't measure up. And I've been a hiring manager before. So what I learned having gone on LinkedIn is you don't want to leave any resource untapped. So there's a group called Jobs for Recruiters on Facebook. And I went on, I said, hey, I'm looking for a role. I can't take entry level, but this is how I recruit. I'm a community builder. I build relationships to create pipelines. And by doing so, it brings in higher quality. And I got a whole bunch of messages, but one of them was a hiring manager, a recruitment manager at Amazon. And she said to me, we had a talk, and she's like, Dan, I don't necessarily know that you would fit my team, but you have such a creative, innovative way of doing this. I don't think I could let this go. So give me the weekend to think about it. In the meantime, if you have anybody that you know at Amazon, make sure you reach out to them. So that's what I did. I reached out to my friend Kendall, and he put me in touch with his boss. So I jumped on the phone with his boss. Her name's Rebecca Leonetti. She's in my group. She's by far the best boss I've ever had in my life. I'll scream her praises till the day I die. And we had a really good conversation. And she's like, well, I want you to think about it. So I thought about it, and we wound up meeting the next week. And I said, you know what? I do think I want to give it a shot. She's like, well, you have 2 options. You could go down the full-time route, which is a full-scale interview process, or you could come on as a contractor. And if the contractor side of it would be a lot faster, but it would give you the experience with less of the metrics to hit. And it would really allow you to see whether this is something you want to do full time. So I had both options there. And at the time, I still didn't know if Amazon was the fit for me. I'm not a structured person when it comes to this, and I have very strong opinions. But I said, so let me take.
But it'll let you get paid to test the waters.
Yeah, exactly. And I had hated contracts before. My anxiety had been through the roof, but I decided to take it. And what wound up, so just to kind of close the loop. So she goes, okay, well then let's get it going. I said, wait a minute, are you offering me the job? She's like, yeah, that's what I meant by let's keep it going. I'm like, oh, crap. I didn't expect this to happen this quickly. So we're off to the races. By the next week, I'm starting, and to make a long story short, betting on myself paid off, because within 2 months, I was training new hires. I was taking on some of the highest priority roles. And just so everybody knows, currently I sit as the point of contact for diversity, equity, inclusion, recruitment initiatives for my division. I train new hires. I train hiring managers. I'm one of very few people outside of the executive recruitment team that is tasked with hiring the highest level roles that we have. I'm talking about $500,000 roles. And next month, I actually am interviewing to convert to go full time. So again, I just have to say, sometimes betting on yourself pays off.
Well, a couple of takeaways that I have seen play out in slightly different ways, but I think are so important for people who either are unemployed or they really hate their current roles and their jobs. Is number one, you got clarity, because without that clarity informed how you spoke about yourself, who you spoke with, the kinds of organizations you targeted. It informed everything. And you put a plan in place to be able to make that transition without coming in on the ground floor, because the salary was a deal breaker for you, and everyone has different deal breakers. But for yours was, I can't make less than X amount of money. And so given that deal breaker, then you went through a non-traditional job search, which I think is a lot smarter. You didn't just spam applying online for recruiter roles, because your experience, without explaining, someone maybe wouldn't get it, but you showed how your other skills were an added value. And I'm sure you showed transferable skills, but that network building that's an added value that allowed you to come up a little higher on the salary. And then lastly, the fact that you tested the waters before jumping in fully, allowed you to really explore what you liked, what you didn't like. And then once you made the commitment, all of your earlier expertise then lent itself to this role and then some. And you're gonna, your career is what's the word? It's rising very fast as a result.
Yeah, it's almost unreal to me. There's a lot of times I sit back and I think, is this really happening?
And you put in a lot of blood, sweat, and tears to make it happen. So clearly it wasn't easy, but I
was putting in 16, 18-hour days. I was looking at everything. This was at the turn of social audio. I was looking to see how the intersectionality of all these different platforms, how to navigate, how to look good. And there also had to be a belief in my own intuition. And then sometimes you don't even realize that, but you said something very important. I very adamantly don't call myself a LinkedIn coach. I don't call myself a coach, period, because I don't take on paid clients. I don't enjoy taking on paid clients because the parameters surrounding the finances weigh me down. Yet we both know I do a lot of coaching.
You're doing a lot of, yeah.
Yeah. And the piece that you said was the clarity. The biggest issue I find with people is there's this thought dynamic out there that if I'm a job seeker and I say I'm open to anything, then that gives recruiters more ability to find something for you. However, it has the exact opposite effect. When a recruiter is looking to fill certain roles. Now, some recruiters have 100 recs, but they're looking to fill certain roles. So being able to identify exactly what you want to do is tremendously helpful, because even if that recruiter doesn't have, recruiters are built into this recruitment community and they could usually refer you. So I always talk to people about clarity, and it annoys some people because they're like, okay, well, can you help me? I'm like, well, here's the thing. You need to find clarity. I'm not a clarity coach. I can give you tips, right. But you really need, and I'll be like, you need to talk to Virginia. And then once you do that, and once you have that identified, then come back to me and we'll open up the book. I'm going to use a very old term for the younger audience. I'll open up my Rolodex and we'll figure out how to get you to where you need to be. But the second thing that you brought up is not being conventional. So we have moved away from the bulk submission system. It's not economical right now. And this was brought on by the pandemic, because when so many people are on the job market and you have 100, 200 people looking at or 1,000 people looking at the same job, it's really difficult to stand out. So, because if a recruiter has 1,000 resumes on his desk or her desk, not only is that too much, but it gets to that point where we almost zone out.
Well, the traditional route is it's crowded.
Yeah, it really is. So that's where this idea of informational interviews comes in. The idea of, how do I know my UVP, my unique value proposition,
right. And
how
to that Facebook group. That's another non-traditional way. You were able to get your voice heard amongst a smaller group.
Yeah, it was something that I did my research. I looked, I asked people questions. Where can I find this? Where can I find that? And more often than not, they were willing to help. So by using these resources, it played a tremendous role. I just think that the reason it's not done more, and I understand this because I was there, the job search is such a hard process that we get so inundated. Sometimes we forget to take that step back and breathe. But that step back to breathe allows us to have a renewed perspective and a clearer perspective on what we need to do. And I think that was something that I really had to sit with for a long time. Because I remember Anna saying to me, she's like, "Dad, you're going to be offline this weekend. I have all of your notifications turned on. So the second you jump on, I'm going to know. Stop it." I'm like, okay. But it was the best thing for me.
Awesome. And to me, clarity is everything. I actually don't do career clarity coaching, but like you, I have a roster of people that is what they love to do. But once they're clear on it, then we are off to the races. I can write whatever they need. And then you're in a position to help them find a role. So yeah, it's everything. Wearing your recruiter hat, now that you've been on the other side, what, I know that you do source a lot of people through your community. What do you look for in a candidate? And are there red flags that you would love for people to be aware of?
So yes, I think we have to differentiate if we're looking at like LinkedIn red flags, or if we're looking at overall red flags.
However you're looking
sure.
at people. Yeah. So are you looking at people exclusively on LinkedIn? Yeah. Walk me through where you look, what you're looking for, and red flags you see.
So what I'm going to provide is an overview of what the standard recruiter will look at. Stylistically, I'm very different, but to provide this perspective. So there's a couple things to note. One is everything that somebody does should be clean and tidy. This is your job that you're looking at. So there's an expectation that it's almost the equivalent of church clothes or synagogue clothes, where everything's buttoned up, clean and looking good. Now, that doesn't mean you can't have individuality, but you do want that centered picture where you're not sitting there drinking from a funnel at a friend's birthday party.
Yeah. So individuality within the context of professionalism.
Exactly. Okay. Thank you for saying. And again, everybody, I'm neurodiverse, so you're going to hear Virginia really provide that clarity piece to some of the things.
Funnels, no bongs.
Yeah.
Right, okay, got it.
No bongs whatsoever. Okay. And don't get me wrong, I grew up on beer bongs. I enjoy it, just not for this purpose.
Got it. Know your audience, right?
Yeah. The other thing that I really like to see, especially when job seekers are using LinkedIn, is I like to see somebody that has taken the time to keep consistency and continuity, but also understand a bit about what recruiters are looking for. There's so many resources out there, regardless of whether you're coming to me or Carolyn Christie or Bob McIntosh or Melanie Wexler or whoever the case may be. There's really no excuse anymore to say, well, I don't have the resources. And that's not even to mention YouTube. I was watching Sonal Ball and then Diana Yang earlier today. Like, there's so many resources.
Yeah.
So that's a really important aspect. The other thing, and this is where it gets down to it, is there's this concept of culture fit versus culture add. Culture fit is when a company is looking for somebody that fits in the current mold of everybody that is there. Culture add is when you're looking for somebody that exhibits traits that you don't currently have and you're looking to bring on. I am always looking for culture add. And the way that you do this is a couple of things. One is, I don't care what role you are going for, how boring you think it is. Creativity and individuality, as we mentioned, is the key. Your banner is a great place to show that creativity. But the biggest place to show this, and I had a conversation with a job seeker just the other day, and he's like, well, I heard in the about section you're supposed to keep it clear and concise. But that doesn't mean boring. This is your opportunity. This is a blurb that you do not get to do on your resume, where you get to show your personality. You get to show who you are. Now, that doesn't mean go into a diatribe about why you picked a Subaru over a Toyota, but it means I want to learn about you. I want to know where you've been. What are your motivations? And by doing that, it provides me insight into your personality. And when you take this coupled with potentially, and I say potentially because not everybody is strong on this, recommendations, that really is a great indicator for me of who you are. And now I'm able to see what you're bringing to the table from a job perspective and an experience point of view, but also from a personality point of view. One thing I do want to mention, because it's so centralized to what I go through, is the idea of sharing or oversharing on your LinkedIn profile. I have written article after article and newsletter after newsletter about neurodiversity. However, each of us has to make our own decision about how comfortable we feel in putting things that are part of who we are, but may produce bias out there into the world. There is nobody that should be judging you one way or the other. So if you are somebody that wants to stand up and say, I'm disabled, I'm neurodiverse, I'm blind, whatever the case may be, you should be able to put that on your profile so people know what I don't want to say what they're getting, but who they're talking to. At the same time, there shouldn't be a knock if you don't. So for those out there, you really have to kind of pick and choose. And no, I'm of the prevailing opinion that if somebody's not going to accept you for you, then it's not the right company for you.
Yeah, I think about this a lot, and I always tell people, if there's some, like faith-based stuff, political stuff, there's bias around that. And so I always tell people, everything that you put out there is part of your brand. And brands, by their very nature, are designed to sort of repel and attract. So if your desire is to repel the people that are opposed to your brand, then put it out there. But if you really aren't in a place where you can afford to repel anyone, then you don't share. And it depends on where you are in your comfort level.
No, absolutely. And So it's just a very interesting topic to me because I don't believe in talking about politics, and I really don't believe in talking about religion on social media, but there's always exceptions. So with me working in diversity, equity, inclusion, there are times where politics,
There's an intersectionality of it.
yeah, exactly. So I may bring that up. For example, what Ron DeSantis just did in Florida by eliminating the areas that were predominantly Black, because those two areas went against him in the last election, I think is complete BS. And trust me, everyone, I'm being on my best behavior because I normally would use different words. So that is something I would be very openly posting about. Now, is that going to turn people off?
If you were living in Florida and job searching, would you, if
Yeah,
you were
I still
advising
would.
someone, you would still put it on?
So I would still put it on.
Okay.
I'm not going to.
So you have to decide where you are, because someone, and that's what I would advise, saying, if you put this on there and you're okay with not getting opportunities because of it. I sort of felt that way with the COVID vaccine stuff. Like, if it's a deal breaker for you, then put it on there. If it's not, don't. Or if you don't want to lose an opportunity because of your stance on it one way or the other, then don't share it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think it's a very individual decision.
Right.
I keep going back to this idea, and this is easy for me to say, being in a position, and I would not want to work for a company that did not support equality.
Mm-hmm.
But I know that when I was at my lowest point in my job search, and I've job hopped for a long time, I know for a fact that may not have been a consideration for me.
Yeah, right.
And at one point, it makes you feel like you're not staying true to yourself and you're doing yourself a disservice, especially when you're not able to talk about values that are really core to who you are. But at the same point, you can't hold yourself to that high standard because we still have to make a living. And if we're not able to make a living, then we're not supporting ourselves and we're not putting ourselves in that position. So there's no right answer to a lot of these questions.
That's right. It's individual. And to me, it sort of goes back to what we first spoke about, which was clarity. So you need to know your deal breakers as part of that. And your deal breakers can change. Sometimes it's money, sometimes it's values with the company. And you sort of rank them. And some you can bend on a little, some you can't. And as your life evolves, you really have to always reconsider that stuff. I made decisions in my career when my kids were little that aren't a factor right now. So, no, really good chat. And I'd love to sort of pivot, but it's a tangential pivot. You're very vocal about discrimination when it comes to hiring practices, especially DEI, gender and racial wealth gaps. What advice can you share? Or what advice do you share to job seekers that are navigating these waters, given that, some people are in different places in their life? How do they position that on their resumes, on LinkedIn, when they're having discussions with people?
So there's a couple things to keep in mind. One, and I'm bringing this up not to be self-promoting because it's not paid, but one of the ways is through education. A lot of job seekers simply don't know what their value is on the market. They don't know how to do the research because there was never a class that told you, hey, this is how you identify what your value is. This is how you identify what you should be making in your title and in your local area. So the first thing that I always talk to people about is that educational aspect. And the reason I was bringing that up is because I'm running 2 master classes in my group, and the second one is about this very thing. So the education extends. So I've had people that were making $50,000 a year, and when I ask them what they want to make, they're like, okay, well, I'd be happy with 70. I said, well, why would you be happy with 70? As my dogs are barking. Sorry about that.
Mine too. Yeah, mine just went nuts. I'm hoping noise cancellation kicked in.
Yeah, me too. I think there's somebody at the door, but whatever, it's real life. So I asked, I said, why do you want to make 70? Because it's a big bump to 50. I said, well, what if I told you that on the open market you're worth 150? Do you really want to be leaving behind 80,000? And they're like, what? Mm-hmm. And the thing about this is that, 1 second.
Can you imagine selling a home without looking at what other houses are selling for? Nobody just guesses the number to sell their house, right?
Well, the fact of the matter is as job seekers, your biggest resource is data. And if a company wants to hire you and they lowball, and you say, well, I just want to get paid a fair rate based on the current economy, and you could pull out where you've done the research and what it shows. Now, a company still may not hire you, but it's not like they could go and say, oh, you're asking for something astronomical. And a lot of times that's what it comes down to. So the first step is education, but with the caveat with that is that because of systemic oppression over time, basically all non-white males have it seems have an issue with asking for what they want or bringing things up in negotiation. So the second part of the second part of what I teach is about negotiation strategy and how you identify. If you are going for a different job in your current organization, you're not going to be making as much money as you would.
I heard your dog. Can you hear mine?
I cannot hear yours. I'm just texting my wife and letting her know that I will give away the dog so she doesn't come down.
You don't. It sounds like the tiniest little gift. Mine is barking like a loon, 5 feet away from me right now.
No, and I would never give away my dogs, by the way. Right?
Oh, God.
So that second aspect is negotiation. If you go for a different job in your current organization, there's a certain scale, so you're not going to get as much money as if you went to a different. So there's a lot of knowledge base, and with all this is the mental health aspect of it, and just making sure people have the confidence that really they need and that they require to do things. So, excuse me, we have to really change how people are viewing themselves. So now taking this and asking me, well, what tips? There's a couple of things that you could do. One is to know the market rate going in, to be prepared. The second thing is, if you're going to get offered a position, a lot of large companies have things like stock options and bonuses. I recommend figuring out 2 or 3 variations of offers that you're willing to accept. The reason I suggest this is because if you're looking for a higher cash option and less stock, and they say, well, we would rather give stock, well, how much more do you want to ask for? Mm-hmm. By having these already at your disposal going in, it puts you at a lot better advantage in negotiation. The other thing I look at is you do your research. How many people what are the projections? What are they hiring? Really what you're looking to see is, do you have more value to the company, or does the company have more value to you? And that's going to provide you leverage, or if not leverage, make the determination of what you need to be willing to, and I'm not going to use the term settle, but what you would be willing to take. So that's another component of it. Now, as far as just getting in, a lot of people don't realize if you're a Black female candidate, you can go to a company and say, I want somebody on the interview during the interview process that is a similar that is a Black female. So that gives the ability to have somebody that knows exactly what your frame of mind and what you're communally going through to give yourself the best odds to have somebody pulling for you. Now, that doesn't mean that that person is going to automatically give you a yes vote of confidence, but what it will do is at least have somebody that can provide the interviewers with an accurate perspective. And then the last thing I would say is quite simply, and there's a lot to ask, know your rights, know the laws. If a company is going to go against the regulations, I'll use the Americans with Disability Act as an example, know enough to know that so that you could either call them out on it or bring it up in conversation, not as a tactic, but as a way to really work throughout the process.
Is it your sense that, I have two questions. One, you said that you're likely going to get less internally than externally because the scales are just different, right? In terms of the pie that the person has to work with who's hiring.
Yes, but also
that data helps regardless?
It does help regardless. But when I said that, so here's the way that you have to look at it. For internal transfers, a company is only going to be able to go up X amount. And this is all based on their perceptions. But if you're currently working, and this is why everybody says the best time to look is when you're employed. Mm-hmm. If you are looking for a position and you have the leverage to know that you could stay where you're at, they don't know, then that secondary employer is going to have to produce enough on top of what you're already making to entice you to leave. Because of that, there's going to be an excess bonus or piece of the pie that they're going to be offering. So that's really what it comes down to. I mean, look at it this way. Phone companies offer to buy you out of your current contract and give you a discount for somebody that's presenting new business. It's the same principle. You're not going to get as much of that benefit by staying where you are. You may get offered a new promotion, but it's only going to have, let's say, a $300 off as compared to say, oh, well, we'll cover the rest of your $1,000 contract, plus we'll give you a phone for like a new iPhone. What are we at, 15?
And that goes to the considering a couple of variations. You need to consider those pieces.
Exactly.
The other piece I wanted to ask you, you're right. Many people are hesitant to negotiate, and especially when times are tough. People are afraid that if they don't take the offer, they're going to lose it. You know a lot of recruiters. You've worked with a lot of hiring managers. Is it expected to negotiate, or can you think of instances where people just say, "No, not negotiating"?
There are companies that are hardlined. There are also times where, and I'll use an example. I'm not going to state where this was at, but there was a situation where we had a candidate that was so high level that we didn't want to up level them because we needed to make sure that they were comfortable with where they were at. But we saw that trajectory. So in that case, we're really considering that candidate as the level above. So we're not going to lowball her. We are going to make sure that the offer is up to where it needs to be so that that person feels valued in both spots and incentivizes to not only come on board, to stay. So yeah, I'll kind of end cap it there.
So you're saying it was like, this is our best and final? It was presented that way versus?
Not necessarily. I think it's more of there are times where you are expected to negotiate, but there's other times where a company may just present you with an amazing offer, and you could still negotiate, but not everybody does. Companies do
like
expect a level of.
If you've done your research and you get the offer, and it's within your range, I guess, how do you know when to negotiate and when you don't? If
I think that's an individual choice. A lot of people would say you always negotiate if you can. I don't think it's that simple. Now, I'm going to say something that some people may think, well, why is he the one saying that? He doesn't really have a right to say that. And that is, especially in minority communities where the gender and racial wealth gap is so exorbitant, I don't ever encourage people to take less than market rate, or at least the rate that, and I use white men as an example because that's the bar for the gender and racial wealth gap. I would never tell somebody to take less than that bar. You want to be making dollar for dollar what everybody else is. So if you are looking at the data and they're offering less, even if it's within your range, then my suggestion is always to take that, because my goal is to narrow that gender and racial wealth gap. And when somebody takes less than a dollar for dollar, it's only exacerbating. And it's easier said. Yeah, it's easier for me to say than in practicality, especially with the current economy. But it's what I encourage people to do if they feel comfortable.
So I've heard before from several people that we're connected with that say, do your research, get the range, and then when you are discussing it, aim for like 75 to 80% of that range. Do you feel like that's a fair number?
So they're saying, so in other words, if you have $100,000 budget, they're saying to aim for that $70,000-$80,000 over here.
So if the range, if you research for X job and the average range is, $50,000 to $100,000, then when you're negotiating, you want to try to aim for 75 to 80,000.
I would say more along the lines of settle for the 70 to 80,000. If it's like that being your low bar, because
right. Like that's where you want, right? We're saying the same thing. Okay.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But I think the other thing that people need to keep in mind is that right now we're talking about salary. There's other intangible factors that come into play, like vacation time, like bonuses, 401k, so on and so forth. So you may have one company that offers $100,000 and another that offers 80, but that $100,000 you're not getting the 401k match.
You're right. You have to factor in the cost of the benefits, the total compensation.
Yeah. So you really want to make sure that your priorities are straight on what you need. For the last 10 years, my wife has worked a job that has probably the best benefits you could ever get. In fact, out in California, Kaiser Permanente is big, and we get the same benefits that the people that actually work there do. So because of that, to this point, I've been able to say, okay, well, it's more important to me at the cash level. But if we didn't have that
on the health insurance, it's not
okay. And just to throw some names out there, Microsoft has amazing benefits. Paramount has amazing benefits. American Express is widely recognized as the organization that has the highest average vacation from the get-go. So from day one, I think it's like 25 days. So all these different companies have different intangibles. Amazon, we're known for our bonus structure and for our stock options that vest really well. So each company is very, very different. And, the other factors that you can look into are we're talking diversity, you could do research to find out what their diversity population is. What do they have in the internal organization? How prevalent? What are they doing? All of these things come into play because people always ask, well, what about the culture? Here's the thing. Recruiters are basically in a different box than the day by day. So even if a recruiter wants to tell you what the culture is like, they may not have all the answers. And that, again, goes back to the informational interview and doing your research to find out these data points and these metrics that show the true essence of the organization.
Right. So you're talking about like the
ERGs, employee resource groups.
Yeah.
No, you're welcome. And other organizations, we do a lot of nonprofit work. So
look at the government code search. Look at people's headshots, right?
Mm-hmm.
See if it's the kind of place where you want to be. That's to me, that's one of the. I love that you can search for people and look at their pictures on LinkedIn, and if you see a bunch of people that all look the same, then that might not be your place.
Yeah, the only difference is you don't get to swipe left or right.
Right, exactly. Oh my gosh. Well, Dan, thank you so much. Your insights are wonderful. They're actionable. I so appreciate it. So you've got your day job recruiting. You've got this massive group that you're running. What is next for you in 2022? For the rest of 2022.
So right now, and I say that I'm a very superstitious person. I was a hockey player for 20 years.
Over your shoulder while you're talking.
Yeah. So I had applied to do a TEDx, and I am waiting to hear back. And that's going to be the push point for me to take off my professional speaking career, because, as I've mentioned to you privately, my goal right now is to make enough money where my wife can take off, because she's been the breadwinner. She's worked her tail off to support me when I wasn't at my best. So I want to give her the opportunity to really seek out and get that clarity to what she loves and what she wants to do. So to do that, I need to make enough money, both in the recruiting world, but also professional speaking. And I love professional speaking. Well,
people really do listen to you. And to be able to scale that would be amazing.
Yeah, and that's what I'm doing. So I have my website that's already developed, but it's being fine-tuned. I have my one-pager ready. I'm working with a wonderful, wonderful woman by the name of Jen Buck, who I had on my Women's Empowerment series. She's become a dear friend to me, and she's a professional speaker, and I'm ready to hit the ground running. I did 60+ speaking events in 2021. Not one of them was paid, but I did so because I wanted to fine tune. Even from the last time we spoke, I realized, okay, I was saying I'm too much. So I've been trying to make sure that I get to the point that when I step in front of an audience, I'm able to capture their attention and keep it from open to close, and provide them with something that they could truly take away, not just in their head, but in their soul. And that's what I really strive to do. So,
another example of exploring an ancillary pivot and practicing.
Yeah.
This time unpaid, right?
Yeah, but I had to, because it's sharpening your skill. It's, Michael Jordan used to take thousands of shots. Steph Curry is probably a better example now. This is the same thing that I was doing now. Well, some people would say, no, I want to get paid right off the bat. Absolutely. I'm just the type of person that if I'm going to do something, I want to do it right. And I don't want it to come across without a certain level of professionalism. Mm-hmm. So that was my path. But, I also tried coaching. And like I was saying before, I hated coaching, not because I didn't like coaching people, but because I didn't like the financial association, and
administrative part of it.
yeah, that just didn't sit well with me. The other part of that is that there are times, and you know this better than anyone, where two people think that they match up on a coaching basis and you realize that you just don't. And when there's a financial component to it, it makes it really difficult to say, okay. And yeah, and I don't like that because it winds up creating hard feelings. And there's certain scenarios like you brought up before with with COVID. I was working with somebody that had job opportunities, but couldn't take them because they didn't have the vaccine. And not that I judged, but if I'm being frank, it was limiting. Right, so I wasn't able to get to that place with them that I ultimately would have wanted to. And so, yeah, always long answers to short questions.
No, my goodness. All right. So people want to follow you, learn more. Is your website up? Because what I have on your bio is your LinkedIn page,
which is my preferred.
Okay.
It's going to be done soon. I met with my website designer, who's also a good friend, Juanita. She's from Australia, just tremendous. And so we're getting that finalized. She has everything that she needs. So LinkedIn is the best bet. I will say I have a pretty strong away message, but the reason for that is I'm so inundated.
Of messages.
Yeah. So I want to be very clear and transparent of what I take on. For example, I only do one-on-one calls by referral. And that's simply because when I was doing it before, it took up so much of my time that the ROI wasn't there. But also because of that, I also have office hours every first, second, and fourth Friday of the month for members of my group, in which I'll sit down for an hour and a half and answer questions. So that is really where I say, okay, well, I'm not going to do the one-on-ones, but I'll do this over here.
All of that's in your out of office reply, or when someone messages you that.
Well, basically, like my out of office reply shows my prioritization of who I'm going to get back to. So as an example, here's what it says. Due to the volume of messages I receive, my responses are prioritized by 1, connection referrals, 2, job seekers responding specifically to jobs I'm working on, 3, members of my community, 4, collaboration requests, and 5, all others. Like, I don't talk to people that are looking for internships because I have nothing to do with internships.
Right.
It's not like I'm saying, oh, I hate you. It's just, I'm very upfront about these things.
Well, and I find it's just so refreshing. But it's clear, and you just gave a ton of advice that's applicable to maybe a whole different audience that you don't particularly serve. So, Dan, thank you so much for doing this take 2 on this. I actually think I enjoyed this one. I didn't think I'd enjoy one more, but I really, really loved our second conversation. So thank you.
Me too. I felt like it was more fluid, which was definitely appreciated, but that's why I said that I enjoyed it. I'll come back for part 3 and part 4 and part 5. All right. Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.
You've been listening to The Resume Storyteller with Virginia Franco. To learn more about storytelling strategies to catch the eye of today's online STEM hiring and decision makers, please visit www.virginiafrancoresumes.com.